Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles, where this week I was checking out the news and saw that there was a cryptocurrency scam that's been busted, and the person behind it, and I'm not making this up, is looking at a jail sentence of more than 40,000 years. So in other words, he's going to be really, really old if he ever gets out of prison. So what happened here? So anybody listening from Turkey, by the way? Because apparently this all has its roots in 2017 when the Turkish currency, the Turkish lira, started undergoing rapid inflation. And a lot of people wanted to safeguard their savings because the money in everybody's bank accounts was quickly becoming a lot less valuable than it had been. But if you were to invest that money in cryptocurrency, then at the very least, your savings would be stable. They wouldn't lose value the same way that the Turkish currency was at the time. And most likely, it would actually increase in value. So this wasn't, big money investors who were getting ripped off. It was normal, ordinary, everyday Turkish people who were just trying to look after their savings. So what happened? There was a type of scam that's known as a rug pull, where you have the rug pulled out from underneath you. And what it involves is that you set up a seemingly legitimate business that trades normally for a while, and then one day the investors wake up, the money's gone, and the CEO has disappeared. So this leads us to a gentleman who goes by the name of, and I'm almost certainly mispronouncing this, but I'll have a go, Faruk Fatih Oza. We'll call him Faruk, because I'm probably mispronouncing at least his first name right. So he was the founder and CEO of the crypto exchange that went by the name of Thodex. And he has just been arrested in Albania, where he'd run away to after the collapse of Thodex in April of last year. It turns out that in April of last year, he'd moved an estimated $125 million worth of crypto coins from the Thodex currency exchange to the established Kraken currency exchange, which operates out of the USA and is by all accounts a completely legitimate crypto exchange. He then announced that his company was going to have to stop trading temporarily because of cyber attacks, assured everybody that their money was safe, and then disappeared without a trace until he turned up in Albania this year, where he was promptly arrested. Interpol had put out a red notice on him, which basically means that every police force in the world was asked to arrest this guy if he ever showed up. Now, the 125 million estimated that this guy ran off with is only the tip of the iceberg, because he's not the only one that Interpol are interested in talking to. There's a cryptocrime analysis company called Chain Analysis who addressed his company, Thorex in particular, during its review of cryptocrime in 2021. We're talking about $2.8 billion worth of crypto scams over the year, most of them being rug pulls, where somebody sets up a legitimate crypto exchange, waits for people to invest, and then runs off with all the money. Chain Analysis said in their report for 2021, and I quote, "We should note that roughly 90% of the total value lost to rug pulls in 2021 can be attributed to one fraudulent centralized exchange, Thodex, whose CEO, our friend Faruk, disappeared soon after the exchange halted users' ability to withdraw funds, which works out at an estimate of around $2.5 billion worth of crypto, just from trading done on Thodex, Faruk's exchange." The problem is that due to the nature of cryptocurrency crime, it's really hard to work out even approximately exactly how much money's been lost. Some reports claim that Faruk fled the country with only $20 million worth of crypto, but whatever the total amount lost is, he's not the only Thodex employee accused of wrongdoing. Even if he made off with $125 million worth of crypto coin, that's still just a fraction of the $2.5 billion worth of crypto scam that was conducted through his company's exchange. Turkish newspapers are reporting that the Turkish prosecution service is looking to make a really, really big example of not just Faruk, but the 20 other members of his company who are also accused of running off with ridiculous amounts of other people's money. Again, I quote, "A prison sentence of 40,564 years is sought for each of these 21 people. All of which means that if our boy Farouk gets what's coming to him, even if he did make off with a full 125 million and he gets to keep it and somehow finds a way of spending it while he's in prison, it's still only going to be worth $3,000 a year. The sad thing here, though, is that it wasn't big money blue chip crypto investors who got ripped off here. It was normal Turkish people who were just trying to protect their savings. So, if any of you out there are from Turkey and you know anything more about this, or if you were affected by this, please do let us know in the comments. Anyway, moving on, because, you know, Bitcoin is just so last season, darlings. Where it's at now is AI-generated art. So, unless you've been living under a rock for the last couple of months, you've probably already heard about this sort of thing. There are a number of these websites with an AI behind them where you can input a number of key phrases and then the AI will spend about a minute generating some art for you based on the keywords and phrases that you inputted. And it's astonishing how good the results are. Now, you can get some impressive results just by inputting a couple of words, but you'll get better results by fine-tuning the prompts that you input. So you put in a couple of words and you get an image that's roughly like what you're after, and then you change your prompts around a little bit, and some of the AI art generators will allow you to evolve from the original image that you've generated and just to try to fine-tune it and tweak it. I had a quick go on one of them, probably one of the lesser known ones. It's called Starry Ai. And let me just give you an example. Just by inputting 2 words, alien cat, after 2 minutes, the AI spat this out. Now that's pretty impressive. I mean, it's not going to win any contests, but it took 2 minutes and it generated this just from 2 words, alien cat. So I thought, well, that's pretty impressive, and it's certainly better than I could do by myself. So let's input a prompt with more words rather than just 2 words. And so the second prompt that I tried was War of the Worlds. And this time it produced this. Now, this is obviously a lot more abstract, but it did really remind me, and it's kind of what I was going for, of the album cover from the 1970s Jeff Wayne War of the Worlds concept album. Now, with both of these images, I could go in and evolve them further by inputting additional prompts in order to change up exactly what final image gets produced by the AI. And that's the general idea. And that's exactly what Jason Allen did. Jason Allen lives in Colorado in the USA. And over the period of a couple of weeks, he used one of the more popular AI art generators, known as Midjourney, to generate this. Now, I'm sure you'll agree that while my alien cat was pretty good, this is far superior. But my alien cat was generated from 2 words and it took 2 minutes. I don't know how many prompts Jason Allen had to put in to get Midjourney to spit this out, but it took 2 weeks of tweaking. And then he finished it off and enhanced it with Photoshop afterwards, which explains why this is so much better. And then he entered it in an art contest. And he won first prize. Yep, this was submitted to the Colorado State Fair Fine Arts Competition and took first prize in the digital art category. And a lot of people are not happy about this, although Jason insists he didn't break any rules. When he submitted it, he said it was by Jason Allen via Midjourney, although the judges had no idea what Midjourney was. But he did disclose it before he submitted it. And he did work on it himself. You know, it's been manually finished, but 90% of the work was done by the Midjourney AI. And apparently, he hasn't broken any rules. And he's not apologetic about it. And he's not intending on returning the prize. And, well, honestly, I suppose if he didn't break any rules, if he earned the prize fair and square, that's the fault of the competition for not tightening the rules up. Now, where does this leave everybody else? Because basically AI just beat out a whole bunch of human artists and produced something that is at least as good as anything a human could do. And if you submitted anything to the Colorado State Fair Fine Arts Competition, apparently something better than any human could do, because it won first prize in the digital art category. it will come as no great surprise to you to hear that Twitter is absolutely outraged. Because Twitter's always outraged about something. But they kind of have a point. One of the top Twitter comments was, someone entered an art competition with an AI-generated piece and won the first prize. Yeah, that's pretty shitty. And it kind of is. But it's not really Jason Allen's fault, is it? He did disclose that the art was generated on Midjourney. It's not his fault that the judges had never heard of Midjourney and didn't know what AI art generation was. He was upfront about it. Technically, he won fair and square. So, where does this leave us? Well, I think the first thing that's probably going to happen is that the rules for these art competitions are going to get tightened up, and probably AI generated art is going to have its own category. And while Jason didn't break any rules and technically didn't do anything wrong, he is being a bit of a dick about it. He told the New York Times, "The ethics isn't in the technology, it's in the people. This isn't going to stop. Art is dead, dude. It's over. AI won, humans lost." Now, I think he might be overstating the case slightly here. It's an AI art generator, it's not the Terminator. But while I haven't given a great deal of thought to this, because I've only just heard about it, and doubtless if I had a bit more time to think about it, I could probably come up with other implications, but I'm willing to bet that if you earn a living as a professional artist, you're probably sweating bullets over this. I mean, just off the top of my head, the first thing that leaps to mind is people who self-publish their books on Amazon Kindle, for example, which is a great platform for struggling authors who can't get publishing deals with the big publishing houses. You just self-publish your stuff on Amazon Kindle. I've read a couple of self-published books on Amazon Kindle, and a lot of them are pretty bad, but some of them are really, really good. And none of these books would ever have seen the light of day if people weren't able to self-publish on Kindle. The thing is, if you're self-publishing on Kindle, you probably don't have a lot of spare money, and probably the biggest single cost associated with self-publishing a book on Kindle is organising the cover art. You're either going to steal it from somewhere, in which case you could end up in the shit, or you will commission a struggling artist who makes, if not a living, then at least some spare money by providing artwork for exactly this kind of market. But now you don't need to, because you can just spend 2 minutes on an AI art generator like Midjourney and get great results yourself, which is fantastic news. Unless you're a struggling artist who makes at least some money by doing exactly this. But surely the established artists who produce magazine covers and movie posters and book covers for the big publishing houses, I mean, they don't have anything to worry about, right? Well, I wouldn't be too sure about that. I mean, let's not forget a couple of things. First, this technology is in its infancy at the moment, and it's already capable, with a lot of tweaking and fine-tuning, of producing fantastic results. And the technology is new. It's going to get better. And if you were in charge of one of the big publishing houses, would you rather spend, and I'm just pulling a number out of my arse here because I really have no idea what this sort of thing goes for, but would you rather spend, say, $15,000 commissioning an artist to produce the cover for the next Jack Reacher novel? Or would you like to hire a temp for minimum wage to spend half an hour doing the same thing on Midjourney for you? Yeah. Maybe that's where the future lies. Not so much in conceptualizing, painting, or in whatever way you produce it, producing the art yourself, but in learning how to best use these AIs to do it for you. I mean, there is still some creativity involved in refining the prompts that go into producing this art via the AI. And if you're like Jason Allen, you don't just leave it like that. You do your own work enhancing and retouching it in Photoshop afterwards. So there's some element of creativity involved in there, but it's a different kind of creativity to conceptualizing and producing something entirely yourself. I don't think we're actually seeing the end of human-generated art here. There are always going to be artists. People generate art because they're inspired to do so. I mean, I do, just as one example, I do miniature painting. I don't do as much as I'd like. I don't really have the time for it, but regardless of the fact that there are millions of people out there who are better at it than I am, you know, regardless of the fact that people or things that are not me can do a better job than I can do when it comes to painting a miniature, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop. I don't do it to be the best. I mean, I try to improve, but I do it because I enjoy doing it, and it scratches that creative itch. So there are always going to be amateur artists out there, because people do it for all kinds of reasons, not necessarily to make a living. Whether or not people are going to be able to make a living from it in the future, however, is another question. And I think, yes, they probably will. But I think the market's going to shrink. I think we're going to see actual human-generated, handcrafted art, or even digital art, becoming a very top-end product, a luxury, with very, very few people actually able to make a living from it. In the same way that you don't really see watchmakers anymore. I mean, there are certainly watchmakers out there, and the kind of watches that you buy from a professional watchmaker is going to be really expensive. But you don't see, not every town has a watchmaker, because machines can do it, if not better, in some cases, yes, better, but they can do it faster, cheaper, and on a much bigger scale. Technology moves on. Certain industries that were commonplace are no longer commonplace because technology moves on. Is this happening in the art world? I don't know, but I think it might be. And I'd be interested to hear what you think on the subject. So, you know where the comment section is? You know what to do. So while you're thinking about that, I wanted to close off this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles by revisiting the subject that we discussed in last week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. The fire on board the USS Bonhomme Richard that wrote off a multi-billion-dollar amphibious assault ship. So, first of all, thank you to everybody who appreciated my in-depth description of naval firefighting in the last episode. I know a lot of you really quite enjoyed that. And also thank you to the firefighters, the non-naval ones, who also chipped in with your 2 cents worth. But I felt that, I don't want to flog a dead horse here, but I felt that I did have to address probably the most common comment that emerged in response to my discussion about the fire on board the ship. And that was that it's no wonder it took so long for the fire to be brought under control, 5 days by the way, because the ship was in refit and it only had a skeleton crew on board. Here's the thing. I'm not having a go at anybody who repeated this, well, let's call it an excuse, because that's what it is. I appreciate that not all of you served in any navy for any period of time, and you're not really aware of what happens on board a ship when it's in a refit, and when the Department of the Navy says, well, the fire burnt for so long, partially because the ship was in refit and there was only a skeleton crew on board, you're inclined to trust that. I mean, they're the Department of the Navy. Surely they know what they're talking about. Well, let me pop that particular bubble, because that is not an excuse. The ship being in refit and only having a skeleton crew is no excuse for why a fire should burn unchecked for 5 days on board a major warship in a major naval base. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I should acknowledge that there are some differences between the Royal Navy and the US Navy, apparently, which I wasn't aware of, but became aware of thanks to your comments in the last video. But there are some differences between the Royal Navy and the US Navy when it comes to ships going into refit. Apparently, in the US Navy, when a ship goes into refit, it does maintain a skeleton crew, but the ship is basically handed over to the dockyard. That is not the case, or it certainly wasn't the case in the Royal Navy. The ship will still have a skeleton crew. Most of the crew will be sent out to other ships to get the training done that they need to in order to get qualified, which you cannot do on a ship in refit. But there will still be a skeleton crew, in exactly the same way that there will still be a skeleton crew on board a US Navy ship undergoing refit. The difference appears to be that in the US Navy, when a ship goes into refit, firefighting responsibility is also passed over to the dockyard. Now, I cannot comment on how well prepared the dockyard is to handle a fire on board a ship. Judging by the fact that the USS Bonhomme Richard burned for 5 days, I'd say probably not very well prepared at all. But that is not the case in the Royal Navy, because believe it or not, dockyard welders don't know shit about firefighting, and Royal Navy crews do. So you keep a skeleton crew on board, yes, but you keep them on board for firefighting. Because when a ship's in refit with dockies crawling all over it with welding torches in their hands, that is actually when you need to pay more attention to fire safety, not less. If, for example, a docky is coming on board a Royal Navy warship to do some welding, whether the ship's in refit or not, if the dockyard does not also provide a welding sentry, then a member of the ship's company is detailed off to watch the welder with firefighting equipment in hand in case a fire breaks out. You actually have heightened fire safety awareness when a ship is in refit or when work is being done on it by anybody who is not a member of the ship's company. Because the people that come on board to do work on the ship are probably not firefighters. So the whole idea that, well, the ship was in refit, we didn't have enough crew on board to handle the firefighting is just a bullshit excuse, because the amount of crew that you retain on board should be exactly enough to handle the firefighting, because that should basically be their only job. And if you don't have enough crew on board to handle the firefighting, because the dockyard are supposed to assume responsibility for that, and if the dockyard's firefighting organisation cannot handle a fire that breaks out, burns for 5 days and writes off a multi-billion-dollar amphibious assault ship, well then the dockyard fucked up, and by extension so did the Navy for not doing due diligence and ensuring that the people that they handed over firefighting responsibilities to were actually capable of doing their jobs. Either way, somebody fucked up. We didn't have enough people on board because the ship was in refit is not an excuse. It's an admission of guilt. And anybody trying to tell you that that's a valid excuse is either ignorant of the facts and they're just repeating what they heard from the Department of the Navy, or they are the Department of the Navy and they're just trying to dodge responsibility. Okay? Okay. So glad we could clear all of that up. Well, I'm certain that one's probably put the cat amongst the pigeons, but do let me know what you think about that one in the comments as well. Because on that bombshell, that is going to be it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope I've given you plenty to talk about and discuss. As always, you know where the comments section is. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.